Nobody knows exactly when or where a disaster or health emergency will strike, but emergencies and disasters, whether caused by natural events such as earthquakes, storms, fires, and floods, or disease outbreaks such as influenza, or accidents such as chemical spills, or by intentional means such as the release of a virus or sarin gas, are events that we may very well experience in our lifetimes. Most of the time, we cannot predict or control these events, but there is something we can do. We can prepare for them on a personal and professional level by taking part in educational and training opportunities. The goals of this presentation are to clarify your role and responsibilities as a disaster service worker should an emergency or disaster occur. It will also remind you to prepare yourself and your family before a disaster. And it will give you a better sense of how you fit into the overall emergency and disaster response effort in your community. In order to effectively perform your role as a disaster service worker, it is crucial to first ensure your safety and welfare and that of your family. You and your family should have a household emergency plan. You should inform your family that you may be required to report to work, or at least you may have to be ready to report to work in a declared emergency. Stock up in advance on non-perishable foods, water, first aid, and other supplies for your family that will last for at least 3 days. It is also a good idea to store in your car a bag with critical emergency items that you may need with you as you perform your duties as a disaster service worker, particularly if you are unable to return home for several days. This bag should contain, among other personal and emergency supply items, a change of comfortable clothes and shoes, as well as any necessary medications.
Well, I think for the family, there's a couple of different things. One is for them to understand what my work is and the possibility of me going on short notice or on long notice, and how that would happen, what the steps would be, and what they could do. And then for the family also, we do have supplies set up in the backyard. One of the things that we found, I think it was the Loma Prieta quake, but one of the quakes that really tossed our house around, that if all of our supplies are kind of scattered around the house in the dark, it's really hard to find them. When where are the flashlights, where are the batteries and things like that. So we put everything together into a rolling garbage can. And so we have blankets and food and flashlights and pictures of each other and a radio and things like that. I've found that in a disaster, you don't pull out the manual. I mean, you might tuck it under your arm when you go and run off, but it's got to be in your head to kind of know roughly what you're going to do, because you never know where you're going to be when the notice comes down.
You can get more information on personal and family preparedness by visiting the Governor's Office of Emergency Services website. How will you know when an emergency has been declared so you can respond to the needs of your workplace? There are several ways to find out. When an emergency or disaster occurs, every jurisdiction or agency has its own plan for responding. If you do not know what yours is, you can check with your supervisor or the person in your department or agency who is in charge of disaster response. Some workplaces, for example, may have a system of calling all staff members at their homes. This system may be automated, or sometimes it is organized through a phone tree. Other workplaces may ask employees to call a designated number or the number of their supervisor in the event of an emergency. In any event, you may want to keep these numbers with you at all times and write them down in your household emergency plan. There are times during an emergency, however, the telephones may not be working properly, the lines may be constantly busy, or you may not have access to a phone. If this is the case, the general rule is to listen to the radio or TV to receive instructions. Once you have been instructed on where you are to report for work, or you have been given a specific assignment, you need to get there as safely and as quickly as you can. Government and labor codes define all public employees, including state, county, and city workers, as disaster service workers, subject to such disaster service activities as may be assigned to them by their superiors or by law. It is your responsibility as a public employee to perform these functions necessary in an emergency or disaster. You are a critical member of the response team that will help all of us. Disaster service workers play a critical role in any public health emergency. When this emergency involves a disease outbreak, you and other first responders, including law enforcement officers, firefighters, hospital workers, and ambulance personnel, may be given priority to receive vaccinations before reporting for duty. Protecting your health and safety will help ensure the health and safety of others needing assistance during these times. What are some assignments you as a disaster service worker might be given during an emergency? In all probability, you may be assigned a task that you do not generally perform in a normal day's work. For example, you may have more contact with the public as you provide child care at a clinic, or help register people at a shelter or other service location. If you are fluent in another language, you may be asked to translate for non-English speaking individuals. Other typical tasks may involve logistical support. That is, you may be asked to be a messenger at your designated site, or serve food to emergency staff, or answer telephones. Of course, medical staff like physicians and nurses will likely be performing medical functions such as administering vaccinations and triage. You will not be asked to do anything that is beyond your scope of training, skill, or ability.
The day of the earthquake, I was working on coordinating CPR day, and I was actually here in this building when the earthquake happened. And so I rushed home through all of the traffic and all of that. And we had no power and our phones didn't work, so everyone in the neighborhood monitored their car radios to find out what was happening. And that's how I realized that I needed to come to work. At no time was I asked to do anything that was beyond my capabilities, and no one was pressured to do anything that they didn't feel comfortable doing. And I wasn't in any danger where I was and didn't feel like I was doing something that was over my head. I was certainly doing something I was capable of doing, and I was very willing to do it and felt glad to have an assignment like that.
Whatever task you are asked to do, time will be allotted for meals and breaks, just like a normal workday, so that your needs will be attended to as well. It is important to remember that everyone will be stressed during an emergency or disaster, particularly if the event continues for a long period of time. At the beginning of the event, you may be full of energy and the desire to help in any way you can. As the event continues to unfold, you may begin to feel exhausted and find it increasingly difficult to perform your job. It is critical that you pace yourself and monitor your own physical and emotional status, as well as those of your coworkers and the public you are serving. By caring for yourself and the others around you, there is a greater chance that everyone will respond more effectively and efficiently throughout the event. At this point, you may be wondering, what government support systems are in place to manage an emergency? Just as it is critical for you to have a household emergency plan in place, your workplace and jurisdiction have an established emergency plan as well. By the time you call into work or are called during an emergency Operations Center, or EOC, will already have been activated. All emergency operations centers have a system in place to provide an organized emergency response. In California, we have what is known as the Standardized Emergency Management System, or SEMS. Utilizing the system provides a structured and coordinated response to emergencies and provides a common language for all first responders, including fire, law enforcement, and health providers. It helps to ensure your community has the necessary supplies to meet the health, shelter, and other needs in a disaster. Use of SEMS also permits local government agencies to receive reimbursement for response-related activities and personnel costs under certain disaster conditions, such as when the governor and/or president declare a proclamation of emergency or disaster. If you do report for work during an emergency, your diligence in record-keeping, such as consistently signing in and signing out, is critical to recouping these costs. Furthermore, letting your supervisor know your whereabouts will help coworkers find you in case you are needed for personal or job-related matters. Emergency preparedness requires practice. Participation in drills, exercises, and trainings increases the likelihood that your agency and community will be better prepared to respond when an actual event does occur. These opportunities will help you gain a greater understanding and appreciation for what might happen in a real event, what you might be doing, and how you can be of greatest help. During an emergency or disaster, your work as a disaster service worker is critical to the response and recovery of your community.